Hi all, welcome to the day 7 of the Kubernetes series. So today we are going to talk about the deployment. Till last lecture, we completely discussed about the Kubernetes architecture, its various components. Then we discussed about the pods and replica set. Finally, we are going to discuss about the deployment that is related to replica set itself. Okay. Now, what is pod? Pod is just a single instance of your application, and in the Kubernetes, this is the smallest object that you can create. What is replica set? This we already discussed in the last lecture, that it manage your multiple pods. That is to make sure that you have a high available environment in your Kubernetes cluster. Let's say if you have a huge number of users, you can increase or scale the application using the replica set. Okay. Now, what about the deployments? Okay. So deployment is basically a higher level object that is going to manage both the pods and the replica set. And it provides more flexibility in terms of the update and rollback capabilities. This we are going to discuss in the upcoming lectures when we will talk about the Helm chart. And using the Helm chart, we are going to deploy various type of applications, and to upgrade or roll back those applications, the deployment provide the more flexibility capabilities. Okay. So this is a simple diagram where I have showed that the pod is the smallest object that you can create in your Kubernetes world. Then you have the component that is replica set, and it manage the replica of your pod. Depending on the number of users you are serving, you can scale up or scale down your application or the number of pods. Then what is deployment? Deployment manages the replica set. So this is the higher level overview of the entire pod, replica set, and the deployment. So deployment is managing your replica set is managing your pods. Okay. Now, a deployment can schedule multiple pods. That is same like the replica set. That was also managing the replicas of the pod, but deployment is providing more flexibility in terms of the upgrade and rollback procedures. A deployment represents a single purpose with a group of pods. Let's say you are deploying a Airflow application on your Kubernetes cluster, and that is being served on multiple pods. So all those pods where your Airflow application is running is managed by a single deployment. Okay. A single pod can have multiple containers that we already discussed. That in a single pod, generally you will have only one container, that is the main application container. But there are situations where you have the helper containers as well. But if you are deploying more than one container in a single pod, then both the container are sharing the same storage, same networking, everything, and they can connect using the local host itself. This flexibility was not available in the Docker environment, so Kubernetes came into picture. Now, to access the deployment which are having multiple pods, there is again a concept of labels and selectors that we already discussed, and the concept of service we are going to discuss in the upcoming lectures. Okay. Now, I don't want to go in the concept of the service because we are going slowly, and one by one, I will make you understand all the components related to Kubernetes. And regarding the last point, what I have mentioned over here, that a deployment should have only a stateless service. This I will explain in much detail in the upcoming lecture, so don't worry about this particular line as of now. Okay. Now let's talk about the deployment YAML. It will be same what we discussed in the replica set example. There are 4 high-level fields: API version, kind, metadata, and spec. API version for the deployment is again apps/v1. The kind, here in place of replica set, we are creating a deployment. What is the metadata for this particular deployment? So the name of deployment is Nginx deployment. The label on my deployment is app Nginx. That's it. These are the details about the deployment. Okay. Now under the the specification section of the deployment itself. Here we are mentioning that the replica for this particular deployment should be 3. Means 3 pods should be up and running for this particular application. Now the next field is selector. So here we are specifying that which all pods should this particular deployment should manage. So only those pods which are having the app Nginx as the label will be managed by this particular deployment. Next is the template section. In this template section, we are giving the template for your pod. Means under the pod, which container should run, all those specifications we are giving inside the template section. So in the template section, the metadata on my pod is again app nginx as the label. Okay. Under the specification of my pod, the specification is that in my pod only one container should run with the name nginx, and the image for that particular container is nginx. And any tag you can use. For now, use latest one also. So that should be fine. It will pull that particular image from the Docker Hub site. Once this deployment file is applied, using the kubectl get deployment command, you will see that the deployment is created. Using the kubectl get replica set, you will see that replica set is also created by the deployment file itself, because here you have mentioned that replicas is 3. So it will create one replica set also for this particular deployment. Using the kubectl get pods command, you will see what all pods are created through this deployment file. You will see that 3 pods are created. In this seamless update and rollback, these things we will do through the Helm commands. So once I explain the basics of the Helm, then only I will go with these two commands. Okay. Helm upgrade, Helm rollback, these things I will discuss in the much later. So now let's try to apply this particular YAML file. Again, I will write it from the scratch, and from my upcoming lectures, maybe after 2 or 3 lectures, I will keep everything in the Git repo, and from there we will just copy those files and we can apply it directly. But to get started, let's try to write it down. Deployment.yaml. Okay. The very first is go to insert mode. The first section is API version. API version for deployment is apps/v1. Okay. The next is the kind. What you are going to create? I am going to create a deployment. The next is metadata. Metadata for what? For deployment. Okay. The name for my deployment is my first deployment. Okay. Labels on my deployment. Anything you can write? App nginx. Fine. The next is a spec or a specification about the deployment itself. The very first is the replicas. That how many pods should be up and running. So let's say 3. After that, you have to give the field that what all pods this particular deployment will manage. So here you need to write the selector. Selector is the field. Under selector, you have the selector will be parallel to replicas only. Okay. Means these are the down level field for the spec section. So inside this, you have the match labels section. And here you are going to specify that it will manage only those pods which have the label app nginx. That's it. Now you have the next section called as template. Inside the template section of the deployment, you will specify the pod specification. So what pods will be running inside this particular deployment. Okay. So here again you have the section metadata. The pod name should be nginx pod or something else you can also write. The labels on my pod is app nginx. Okay. After that, parallel to metadata, you have the containers. Containers is of type the list. So the first item in the list is nginx pod or nginx container. You can write the name of the container. And then image, it will by default use the latest tag. Okay. This is the simple YAML file. Now let's try to apply it. Obviously, there will be some error, but we will see that later. Let's try to create it. Error converting YAML to JSON file. Let's try to debug it. So basically, if you see over here, we missed to specify the specification section for the pod itself. So here one field is missing, that is the spec. And once you added this field, then everything should go a bit right to it. Then only This will come under the spec section. Now let's try to create it. As we already saw that I missed the specification section for the pod under the template section of the deployment. Okay. Now let's try to apply this particular file. Apply -f det.yaml file. Okay. Applied and your deployment is created. Now get the deployment. You will see that out of 3 replicas, 2 are in the ready state and one might be already in the container creating state. It will be up in some time. You will see that, right? 3 out of 3 are in the ready state. Now, if you run kubectl get rs, you will see that this particular replica set is also created by the deployment itself. Now, if you run the kubectl get pods command, you will see that these 3 pods are created through this particular deployment file. I hope now you are clear with the concept of the deployment, replica set, and the pods. Again, this is the entire Kubernetes itself. So in the entire journey, we will talk about this in much detail. Because for now, this Nginx container, we are not accessing it. To access all this, we need a new component called as the service that we are going to discuss in the upcoming lecture as well. In case of any doubt, let me know in the comment section. Till then, keep subscribing for more upcoming videos and shorts. Thank you.